don't know if that's on, but I project anyway. So how many people in this room are actively fundraising for things you care about, have fundraised, or will be fundraising? Pretty much everybody. How many people love it?
Wow.
Nice. How many people just think it's like this horrible thing you have to endure for the sake of your mission of your organization? So my overarching mission in life is to reframe the practice of fundraising away from something that's seen as this kind of necessary evil to move our organizations forward to being something that's really integral to the mission. Because there are so many resources right now involved, with people involved in your organizations, with people who want to be involved in your organizations, with people who will be, that are underactivated. And when I think the term fundraising is such a clunker. The other mission in life I have is to come up with a new word for fundraising, because I think it connotes just funds and resources to get the work we all want to get done in the world is so much more than just money. Money's critical, but it's also time, because an idea is just an idea unless you can get resources flowing toward it. But money is just one of the resources. People's networks, their passions, their commitment, their energy, their time, all needs to be not really even harnessed, because I think so much of what people think fundraising is harnessing these resources, but removing barriers that block the flow. And that's what Natty and Lee and I have been talking about a lot, and I know what Sasha has actually put into practice at his organization. I think one of the biggest barriers is how we deal with people who have money and who have resources to give. I was last weekend I was with our kids. We had 11-year-old twins. We were at, the Met was having an interesting exhibition, a Picasso exhibition, and we were walking around. And I was stunned at how many people were looking at the little labels and not actually looking at the art. They weren't engaging with the art at all. And I think that's what we do, especially when people are, I like to use in resource-rich circumstances, because I often think we think people who are rich are more than just people in resource-rich circumstances, because we all are in those circumstances. But that's what we do. We put this immediate barrier. Oh, this is the CEO of a private equity company, and he or she has a lot of money, and because they have the money, they have the power. And what happens is then we build these relationships based on these kind of false notions of who this person is and who we are and what we need from them, and it creates, in fundraising we often call it the gift that keeps on costing, because we will just, mission drift just a little bit over here because the person who we think has the power and the money has the ability to dictate where we need to be going. So I think the biggest barrier we put up is putting money at the center of the relationship versus actually putting the work we're going to do at the center of our relationship. I started a nonprofit with Quincy Jones, the great music producer, to bring music to kids. And I remember we were sitting in this brainstorming meeting thinking, what should we call this? We wanted to use Quincy's name because he's a powerful name in the music industry. And ultimately, we decided to call it the Quincy Jones Music Consortium. And we specifically chose the word consortium because the word consortium comes from the Latin word constare, which means to stand together. And I think that's so much about what the work that we're doing is, how do we stand together to get stuff done in the world and to really activate what we each can bring to this equation. Versus, the Latin word client, comes from the Latin word clientum, which means to lean against. And that's very fragile, and often what we try to do in fundraising relationships is kind of negotiate everything up front. You give me $10,000, here's what we're going to deliver for that $10,000. And then, by the way, we're going to use data. We were talking about this just in Natalie's class. Then we're going to use data not to understand what's going wrong or how we grow, but data actually becomes a barrier because we're only using it to shift the numbers so they look good for our donors who we just sold on a good idea. We just negotiated everything up front. And it's exhausting. I think that kind of fundraising is exhausting because you're asking people to help you versus work together. So I've worked with a lot of philanthropists, and the first thing I teach them, and when I do board trainings, I teach them, just take the word help out of your lexicon. Just take it out. You're not a supplicant, you're partners in this. And let's figure out how we can work together to make a difference. And by the way, then you can't be rejected because fear of rejection is one of our other big barriers. Because if I talk to you and I am passionate about and raising money and resources right now in support of the oceans, you tell me your passion is the arts, I say go find it, because the world needs you too. Or your passion is education, the world needs you too. And so I'll introduce you to people who are working, our refugees. I'll introduce you to Sasha, because I know he's going to take care and work with you in a really authentic way. And then that's not a rejection of me. That's actually a victory in the world. My belief, though, and my experience, having probably made 6,000 face-to-face visits in my life and done billion-dollar capital campaigns, is most people's real passion is to make a difference. And so if your organization is working on education, on the arts, on poverty eradication, on refugees, on global health, if you're giving people the vehicle through which they really feel like they can build this consortium, take a stand, work together, that's what they care about. That's what people's real passion is, making a difference in the world. So I think we as nonprofit leaders and board members stand together and say, all right, let's each figure out how can we really, both build this community, because we have these 3 buckets of needs. We have sort of existential, just basic safety and security needs. We have community needs. We want to be in a tribe. So I think it's really important as a nonprofit community. And I think it's actually organizations are a big barrier to that, breaking that down so that, and I think that's something Sasha's doing brilliantly, which is breaking down the organizational barriers. So we're building a community of people who care about refugees, whether you're in an organization or not. But we have growth needs. And I think many times nonprofit leaders aren't really leaning into boards, aren't leaning into how do we actually grow together and challenge each other, and not just reinforce, what a great job we're doing, but, oh, we did that well in Africa, and it turned out it didn't work. Let's understand what went right and what didn't. I just have a few more minutes, but when I take a lot of philanthropists on site visits too. I've raised a lot of money for extreme poverty work in Africa. And before we literally ever even hit our feet hit the ground, I say to these folks, I do not want you to go through this experience like a movie critic. I am not trying to sell you. Obviously, it's a work in progress. If we were done, we'd all be going home. We wouldn't be going here. I want you to go through this experience as if we're already partners and think about what you can uniquely bring to this. And then let's have an open conversation, unfettered conversation about how we can actually take it to the next level. And people will often say to me, fundraising's like sales, and they kind of, give me that look. And in fact, my very first blog I ever wrote was fundraising is not sales. But what I've actually come to believe is sales, if you infuse it with the values of caring and respect and, an honest, concern to make a difference, it's really the same. It is. It's motivating people and inspiring people and building relationships to really make a difference.